Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
So the hashtag Cameron resign has been trending all day. Ken Livingstone even tentatively suggested Mr Cameron should be sent to jail. It's not been the kind of attention a Prime Minister wants, but we do know that neither Twitter or Ken Livingstone are entirely representative of broad public opinion. So what actually do the voters think about the Blairmore affair? The headline writers got the first say, and they set the tone for the day. So, two questions on what we've learned about the Prime Minister this week. One, how does it play? What do people think about it? And two, did they think that about him anyway? Has it actually changed anybody's minds? Well, we're better to test public opinion in an unscientific way than in a public house. So look, we've got these two pictures of David Cameron. Christiana, help me out with this one if you could, and then we'll put this one there. Yeah, sure. So, what do we think of the Cameron on the left? What's that one about?
Bit of a character, if anything.
Character?
Yeah.
Okay. Posh boy, yeah.
I think he still looks slightly out of touch, power.
Out of touch.
Yeah.
What about the one on the right? What's the one on the right? That's kind of, I think, how he would like you to think of him. Authoritative leader.
Trying too hard.
Well, let me tell you, which of these two is which is the real Cameron? Do you think it's the posh geezer, or do you think it's the kind of Prime Minister looking policy man on the right?
I think more the posh boy, the Eton lad. The one on the left is more Cameron.
I have to agree.
Has the story this week in any way changed your view?
No, for me, not at all really. I think he's had that opportunity, and he shouldn't necessarily punish the privileged just for being privileged. He's in that position, and it's an opportunity that a lot of people would like to be in. I don't hold it against him for that. It's just
Christiana, what about you? Has your view changed? You've read about these Panama Papers, shares offshore, that kind of stuff.
I think, given what he's supposed to stand for, what the Tories are supposed to stand for, I think it's slightly hypocritical. I think he should have disclosed them prior to the Panama Papers, because we've talked about the fact that we need a fairer economy, one society, and we're trying to crack down on people evading tax. And I really wish he had disclosed it sooner, rather than waiting for it to be out in the open and him being put in a corner now that he has to say something about it. So it didn't. I just thought, well,
Joe?
A lot of people jump on people's backs when the opportunity is there to. Perhaps he could have admitted it earlier when he had the opportunity to, but
could have handled it better.
Could have handled it a little bit differently.
Come on, Christiana. Now you're I think the one who's least favourable view of David Cameron. Would you take it if the chance came up?
That puts me in a very difficult position, because now
you can make a little bit of money, or think you can make a bit of money.
Yeah, if I think about the financial situation I'm in now, I think, yeah, actually,
the moral situation, that's another side of it, but financially,
it does put me
morally,
yeah.
don't know.
Yeah. From the King and Queen pub to the king of public opinion, where does David Cameron stand?
In general, he's viewed as a competent, safe pair of hands, perhaps in a sort of technocratic kind of way. Perhaps he's viewed as a strong leader. In general, over the last few months, there has been a bit of a downtrend in his ratings. It seems to have been more among Conservative and UKIP voters, which would suggest that it may be a case of the referendum and all of the events around that impacting on his ratings.
20 things that don't really look that good. It's only unscientific snapshots of public opinion that we have right now on the specifics of the Cameron admission, but the evidence generally is that it's been a fraught few months for the Prime Minister. One YouGov poll today did put Jeremy Corbyn's approval rating ahead of David Cameron's. That was actually this week, though, rather than since last night. Is it significant? Is a real change occurring? Let's talk to Aisha Hazarika, the former Labour advisor, Suzanne Evans, parliamentary spokesman for UKIP, and the Mail on Sunday columnist, Rachel Johnson. Let's just start on public opinion, how this is playing. Aisha, how do you think it's playing?
Well, I think people have priced it in to how they view Cameron. I think most people do think that Cameron is quite true to the Nadine Dorris, you know, a posh boy that doesn't know the price of milk. I think they do. Are they not surprised at the fact that his father was very wealthy? They're not surprised that his father's name came up in those papers, and they're not really surprised that this has happened. I think people have been surprised about the incompetence with which Cameron has handled this. I think, as somebody who's a former PR specialist, to have denied something sort of 4 or 5 times and then had to admit
or
it.
evaded it rather than denied it.
But I think a lot of the public, and certainly people I've spoken to today who have run focus groups in the last couple of days, it very much ties up with what your own refocus group found out. I think the public think it's not great, but they have priced it into their overall impression of Cameron.
Is that your take, Susanna?
It is. I think actually this is playing extremely badly with the public, but it's playing badly because it's in Cameron's entirely of his own making. Why didn't he just come clean at the beginning of the week and admit that he'd had this £30,000 instead of first saying it's a private matter, I'm not going to talk about it, then saying he had no shares in the future, then backtracking on that, then getting very aggressive and saying put up or shut up, and then having to come clean. As you say, Aisha, a terrible PR move.
So let's just separate the PR from the moment. In the essence of the issue, Rachel first, mountain or molehill?
I think definitely it's a molehill that's being turned into a mountain, but David Cameron has gone up, he's mounted the foothills himself
with the PR
of this mountain by, as you say, not getting all the bad news out and then quickly moving on.
How did this happen, though? What went wrong? I mean, the guy is a PR guy. I mean, how did he not spot this?
I think that one of the big mistakes they've made as well is all the things that Suzanne said, but also playing this card, which is very hurtful for his family and it's very upsetting for his father and all. But he didn't take the same approach with Ed Miliband. With Ed Miliband, Ed's brother, Ed's father, anyone who'd met Ed once, you know, was fair game. So I think there's a sort of double standard. His PR handling and also the cover-up, it seems worse than actually what's happened.
I don't actually agree. I think that the fact that the pictures of Ian Cameron have been displayed alongside pictures of Putin and Poroshenko and Gaddafi and every kleptocrat you can mention has actually, I think the public actually find that rather distressing, and it's almost like a smear.
He finds it distressing.
He finds it distressing, and I think the public understand that, and I think that the reason he probably, for the wrong reasons, he killed the story because he simply couldn't bear his father's name being dragged through the mud.
I think the public, that's the point.
Suzanne.
Yes, he didn't kill the story.
He
kept it running.
Kill the
but
story,
it took him 4 days. He kept it running.
Can I make a point? Certain newspapers did say that Ed Miliband's dad hated Britain. So I think it's, I think there are some double standards at play.
But Aisha, do you think this is game-changing in terms of kind of perceptions of the party and the...
Right, so...
is it going to be big? Because there have been other occasions where people might have thought something big was happening.
So sometimes when there's a big scandal like this, we experience this with the phone hacking scandal in the Labour Party. So when something like this happens, you can be in the feeling that this is going to be game-changing. And I think it will have a profound effect on the local elections that are coming up, on the London elections, and possibly for the EU referendum. I think fast forward to 2020, will this be an issue that moves the needle? I don't think it will.
That's really interesting.
I think it could very much definitely move the needle on the Brexit campaign, because of course what happened towards the end of the week was perhaps in an attempt to deflect this personal attention away from him, we don't know, but we get this announcement of this piece of EU propaganda, this leaflet that the government is having said it's not going to spend taxpayers' money on advertising, billboards, literature, leaflets, anything like that. Sudden volte-face, 9.2 million taxpayers' money going into this leaflet to tell us how to think. And it's coming, of course, at a time when we're saying that we can't afford to pay the junior doctors anymore. It's coming at a time of massive
but look, you're getting
cuts
onto
to
the
adult
leaflet.
social
What
care.
was interesting about our little panel in the pub, 3 people, not
They
a great...
didn't talk about Brexit
Well,
once.
I asked them about Brexit. They all said it's nothing to do with
Thank
Brexit.
goodness
They all
it's the
said
one
it's not
story we
going
can
to
discuss
change.
without it.
But I think, on the other hand, what you also heard for the YouGov poll is that his ratings are plummeting among Conservatives, 75% of whom we know want to leave the EU.
I think he said he wasn't going to stand again for another term. And even though he won an election 11 months ago, we've had the tax credits, we had IDS resigning, we've had the botched budget, and now we've got this. And so I think that the water's draining out quite fast.
But I think the consequences will not be so much for Cameron, but for the next leader of the Conservative Party, because I think the members of the Conservative Party, I think there will be a lot of scrutiny on the candidates having to publish their tax returns, and I think all their financials will be scrutinised.
This is interesting, because you might say, Rachel, I'm slightly looking at you here because...
We're all slightly looking at you, Rachel.
I'm not looking at anyone.
Does this present a problem for what you might call posh candidates for leadership of the Tory party, among whom there are two obvious ones, your brother Boris and George Osborne? I mean, do you think it has an impact?
I think that's a good question. I mean, I don't want to say this, but I think Osborne's probably next in line to have scrutly of his family.
I agree. I think it will hurt
coming
Osborne.
up. I think that's the next thing.
A lot of people are going to say that's very helpful to your brother.
You know, you can't ask me to comment.
No.
As everybody knows, the Johnsons are neither posh nor rich. My brother did, like Cameron, benefit from wonderful opportunities.
You're right about Osborne. You know, he 3 times this week refused to answer questions about his own personal affairs and whether or not he had any offshore accounts. 3 times he refused to answer and got quite angsty when he was pushed.
We are entering a phase where we are going to be expecting senior politicians. In fact, Boris did do this as part of the mayoral election. Yeah, he has. But where we now expect senior politicians...
They should do.
We want your tax... You think we should?
I think they should do, but the thing that worries me, and I tweeted about this yesterday and didn't get a proper answer, is if they did publish their tax returns, would they disclose anything about offshore holdings in zero tax havens?
Well, you could ask them to publish a letter from their accountant as well, or
would it actually show any more than we already know from, let's say, a bald statement?
But I'm wondering whether if you do that and you're expecting politicians never to do anything like have a deed of variation in their parents' will or have an offshore account, whether you're actually holding them to a standard that is going to put some people off.
I think that's right. I think actually, you know, there comes a point where we have to say, is it really fair that politicians are treated any differently in terms of discrimination against them as opposed to what a normal person would have to reveal? And, you know, any ordinary person who's not in public life doesn't have to publish their tax returns unless they voluntarily
Suzanne, you're feeling sorry for the political establishment?
Well, I'm not feeling sorry. I think it's interesting, you know, we are assuming here that we only want to see those tax returns of people who are wealthy. What about politicians that aren't wealthy? Perhaps we'll think, oh, why haven't they made more money? Perhaps they're not fit to be a politician.
But I think the court of public opinion would think that it isn't fair on politicians and they are subject to more scrutiny. But I think post MPs' expenses, people just want to have more scrutiny of MPs, and it's not fair on MPs. But I'm afraid I think that is definitely the direction of travel.
One last one on the Conservatives. I wonder whether this affair, I'm not going to use the word scandal because that's a bit prejudicial.
He's done nothing wrong.
This affair, whether it plays badly for him because it's resonant with a preconception people have that this is a party that's out of touch. Is this what makes... Because Ken Livingstone had a thing. There was a bit of Ken Livingstone tax planning, wasn't there? I just wonder why it...
Yes, I think that came to blows in a City Hall lift, didn't it? Anyway.
I don't, but is it damaging for the Conservatives because it plays to the feeling that they're out of touch?
I don't think long-term it's that damaging for the Conservative Party, because I think, again, a bit like with MPs' expenses, the public sort of expect it of the Conservatives. They expect Conservatives to be rich, posh people that do wealth management. If it's Labour people, they are actually more kind of harsh. I think that's...
Worse if it's Labour.
Well, I think you saw that with the MPs' expenses. I think people have a perception that people on the left and the Labour Party are kind of, again, held to a higher standard of it. It's priced in with Conservative.
Labour millionaires as there are Conservative ones.
I thought money always brought down the Labour Party and sex always brought down the Tory Party. So we seem to be inverting that one.
I think David Cameron's problem is that he is seen as a posh boy. Now, I don't blame him for going to Eton. It wasn't his choice. Presumably it was his parents' choice, but he has surrounded himself by like-minded people, and I think that's what makes him look out of touch. He has not chosen his cabinet wisely.
Thank you all very much indeed. Thanks.
I've been getting